Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're at. Welcome to Drupal Toronto. We were founded in 2006, so we are the third oldest Drupal user group in existence, and it is great to connect with everyone today. Thank you so much for joining. DrupalTO is organized and run with a code of conduct, so we're dedicated and committed to providing a harassment-free experience for everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, or religion. So if anyone ever experiences any challenges with any of these issues, please reach out to me and we'll work to resolve them. Today, we have a number of volunteers helping us run the meetup. And without our volunteers, we wouldn't be able to make these events happen. So myself, I'm Aiden with Foster Interactive. Victoria from our team is helping run as well. Joanne from Daedalus Interactive, and Blake from Pantheon. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all the volunteers who help us. We really couldn't run these events without everyone's participation. And so I just want to remind everyone that the cost of admission for today's talk is to participate in the survey at the end. It really helps us optimize the content that we've got within the events. And also we're thinking about maybe returning to in-person events at some point. And we really need your feedback to figure out when is the right time to do that. And that question is the key question on our survey. So today, just the agenda, we're going to do some welcome and icebreakers in small groups. And then we've got our panel talk, which I'm super excited to do. This is our first time trying this out. So very excited to sort of learn and sort of get together and see what we, try out a new format rather than a sort of classic presentation. And a couple announcements. This is the second part of a two-part series tied to Drupal 9 and Drupal 8's sort of end of life. And just to recap with everyone here, Drupal 8's end of life has already happened. It's November 2nd. And Drupal 9.3 is the next sort of big thing to come out. It's going to be coming out December-ish. I don't know if there's actually a specific date or not. But what's really was sort of maybe surprising to some folks is Drupal 10 is coming out sooner than I certainly thought it would ever be coming out, which is scheduled for June in 2022. Maybe it might be delayed a little bit, but it's definitely intended to come out in 2022, which means Drupal 9 is end of life in potentially November of 2023. Which means that this frequency in the schedule I hadn't been expecting. So it's I think a good time to be talking about what does our upgrade processes look like, what is the end of life, how does that impact our projects that we build with Drupal. Also want to point out that all of the meetups that we do, we have a YouTube channel, and so if you want to see any recordings of past meetups, they're all in the same place here on bit.ly/DTO-videos, so you can find the recordings there. Just want to open it up to anyone now if they have any jobs or announcements of interesting upcoming Drupal events or shout outs for people who are doing hiring or looking for work. If you do, feel free now to just come off of mute and go ahead and make the announcements.
Hello. The ODS is still looking for developers. We have a bunch of positions closing at the end of this month. I will post a link in the chat to ontario.ca/digitaljobs. Have a look. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone else?
Yeah, Kalamuna is also still hiring for a back-end developer, a front-end developer, and lead project manager.
Great. Any Drupal events coming up too? We were sort of talking about this earlier.
Well, DrupalCon is coming up in person in April.
Awesome.
And Evolving Web is also hiring. I just posted our link to our careers site. We're based in Montreal, but we've actually just hired a whole group of people in Toronto. So Toronto contingent are happy to chat with.
Perfect.
Lots of positions available.
Excellent. Okay, so, oh, I see the chats. Anyone else before we move on? No? Perfect. So now we're going to do our virtual social sort of activity. You know, we moved from in-person to online, and one of the key values I feel out of the in-person meetups is to be able to get to know people a little bit, and is to make some connections and get to know other folks in the Drupal community. So what we do now is we have breakouts, and what's going to happen is a box will open up in Zoom and it'll say, hey, can you join this Zoom room? And we're going to get into groups of 4 to 5 people, and there'll be a timer on there that counts down. And so please stay in your group until the timer counts down, and then we'll just go around and take turns within our groups to introduce ourselves and sort of go through an icebreaker question. And I just want to say we're recording the whole sessions today, but not the sessions within the breakout rooms. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you. I hope you had a chance to get to know your fellow community members a little bit. All right, so now we're moving on to the main event, the panel discussion. And so I'm going to pass it over to Blake, who is our moderator for today.
Thank you, Aiden. Yeah, so the topic of the panel discussion today is, Drupal 9 end of life, upgrading to Drupal 9. So we've got a great set of panelists. Aiden, I don't know if you want to share the slide there.
Yeah.
Today. So I'll be moderating myself, Blake Robson, and then we've got Suzanne from Evolving Web, we've got Aiden from Foster Interactive, we've got Scott from Consensus Enterprises, and we've got Squiggy from Calamuna. And so essentially we've got a couple pre-seeded questions just to kind of start the conversation, but ultimately want to open it up and get participation from folks in the audience as well. So if you have a question for any of the panelists, or just a general question, you can either put your hand up or put that in chat, and we'll try to work that into the flow as it makes sense. So I think without further ado, let's get started. So the first question for the group is, what was the hardest D9 upgrade you've done? And maybe kind of talk about it, what went wrong, how you fixed it, if you're willing to share that. So Squiggy, I know you mentioned that you were working on a D9 upgrade. Maybe you could lead us off.
Okay, thank you. I am currently working on a Drupal 9 upgrade where I'm also setting up integrated composer with Pantheon. And I think it's like kind of a new feature that they released, kind of coinciding with the everybody upgrading their sites to Drupal 8. So I think the documentation is like a little bit hard to kind of follow and figure out, like, look at what upstream composer template you're using and figuring out which one you need to get it to work on Pantheon. That's kind of the hardest part, I guess. Previously, some of the sites I upgraded, I didn't do the integrated composer, but another team member did, and they said it was not a straightforward process. If you're, I know this is like really specific, but if your Git upstream is not set up to the right one that Pantheon is most compatible with, it can be it's kind of not straightforward to get integrated composer to work. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So some platform specific challenges. The upgrade.
Yeah, I think, and then also just like upgrading composer or the continuous integration scripts, because there's just a lot of different versions of different tools you're using, and on an older Drupal site, they will be a kind of a wide range of versions that are just not supported in the latest composer build images. So that can be kind of tricky.
Yeah. So for this particular instance, that's something that you're still actively kind of working through. And
yeah. So I kind of was expecting integrated composer to make the process, the build, the continuous integration smoother, easier. but it's just kind of still a little bit, it's just a work in progress at the moment. I need to it's like a lot of getting support from, requesting support from Pantheon support. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully they're able to kind of help you out and get you through that and get that resolved.
Yeah, actually, they just emailed me right before this talk, and I guess there's a node package that's being requested in the build process that works locally when you do a composer install, but it's not working in the Pantheon environment. So that's kind of interesting. I need to look at that more. So excuse me for not having more prepared.
Oh, that's totally okay.
That reminds me of my our experience too is this quite a similar challenge, I think. And it was funny because we have a pretty complex infrastructure in place that is also like tied into, ultimately designed to and built to deploy to Pantheon that was based off of some infrastructure we set up like years ago. And so because it's not actually the Drupal 9 part of the upgrade that's hard, it's Drupal 9 changed our requirements for PHP, which then so it basically makes this cascade of the actual upgrading Drupal 9 part wasn't hard, but we've got like a distro, we've got our custom modules, and that sort of spins up a starting config system that we've got set up that deploys to Circle CI. And then, we've got Docker images that have to run from Circle CI to compile the site. So we push to GitHub, it compiles the site, does like pattern lab and installs and compiles the theme and then pushes that over to Pantheon. And so it seems like a similar challenge that we were facing, which was not specifically Drupal 9's upgrading. It was all these other things and that we had to get all of our other tooling upgraded and modernized to support Drupal 9 itself. So I wouldn't say that's even specifically like Pantheon platform specific in itself. It was more like our build tools that eventually push us to Pantheon was the hard part. And we ended up we had basically had 3 different branches of our like starter kit running at the same time from different vintages of websites. And so, we had to upgrade Node, we had to upgrade PHP. And one of the things that so it took a lot of time to just like each tool, you'd kind of get through it and then kind of move on to the next tool. And then some other challenge came up from there. And so I feel like the mistakes, like sort of going back, we've got it working. Like just this week, it's all like nice and ready to go. And a couple of the mistakes when I was talking with the team, about like, if we were to do this again, what would we do differently? And the first mistake that we sort of identified that we do differently is we tried to upgrade our oldest branch which was sort of like, it's basically like, it almost is back when media wasn't like its ancestry is before media was in like 8.4 core properly. And so we tried to upgrade the oldest one to the medium one and then the medium one to Drupal 9. And so we really should have just upgraded the newest branch to Drupal 9 because it's like the path of least resistance and you could sort out, the environment things and in that order. So that was one of the things that I think was a challenge that was a strategic challenge. We started with the oldest. So maybe sort of one takeaway that we had was like, do the easiest upgrade possible first so that you can learn the lessons. And like, if something breaks, there's not like 10 possible reasons it broke. It's like, there's fewer things to go wrong on there. One of the things we were talking about was upgrading the themes, that's actually within Drupal itself. That was a direct Drupal upgrade. And that was pretty easy, but there's like, there's a few things that are different in Twig from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 because it moved from like Twig 1 to Twig 2. And basically we used a linting tool. I forget the name of it right now, but it's like a popular Twig linting tool so that you can just like pop in and run it on your code and it just pushes deprecation warnings for like old versions of Twig. So that was a really useful tool to like upgrading your theme so that it's not too complicated. And then of course some modules don't have the upgrade path themselves, so that's going to be like specific, but finding alternatives for those modules were in there. So that was just and then the last thing that we did, which I think we would do differently again if we were starting over now, is we had a bunch of projects on Composer 1. And so upgrading to Composer 2, Composer 2 is basically the reason we didn't do it in the past was like a few of our packages just didn't work with it. We're like, let's do that later. And now that later is now, we don't have a choice. We've got to upgrade it because Drupal 9 wants Composer 2. And it's just one takeaway that we learned is because you're doing so many like Composer dependency updates and local, and you like run it, and our build is pretty complex website structure. It's installing a lot of config and a lot of modules and things like that. Is the Composer actually takes a long time to run, even on your local. And Composer 2 is so much faster. So it would have been totally the thing to do to like upgrade to Composer 2 is just like step 1. Just make sure that that's working. And then doing the rest of it would have saved a lot of time on there as well. And the other thing is we have our distro, which is like a Composer dependency, which pulls in a bunch of modules into our specific projects. And by having it on like a different repo, and then you kind of like update it there and then run it, you have to run Composer twice, which doubles the amount of time is. So we ended up like copying and pasting all of those dependencies out just into our test project and just doing all the updates once in there, and that would have saved a ton of time, right? So we did switch over to that eventually, but I would have, if we were to do it again, install Composer 2 off the top. If you have any like upstream dependencies like a distro or something, just like copy all of the requirements into your local project, figure out, get everything upgraded, get it working locally. And then you can copy those specific versions back over to that distro if you manage it or whatever later. So that was what I wish I knew before we started.
Lots of good learnings from that process. Do any of our other panelists have a story that they'd like to tell about a particularly difficult Drupal 9 upgrade, or we can move on to the next question, which is tell us a story about a good one. So I'll leave it up to the panelists to decide which flavor they want.
I'll do a segue. So if you want to move to the next question, we'll put a positive spin on it. So I think one thing we've learned a lot of how to do since the first upgrades to Drupal 8 and now Drupal 9 is just about the whole content migration piece. It used to be always kind of a painful process because there was no good documentation, and it seemed like every single project we would run into some edge case for migrating to media or migrating entity references with circular dependencies and things. But now it seems like those types of things are mostly things that people have done. And so there's documentation and tutorials and just a lot more resources out there. So I found that content migration part of upgrade, which is something for those of you who haven't done a project like this, like usually for a Drupal 7 to 9, that's the approach, is to build a Drupal 9 site and then run content migrations. But there still are some edge cases. So recently we decided on a project for University of Waterloo to migrate a lot of their existing content to the layout builder, and there were no migration plugins for that. So it involved like writing the plugins first, kind of prototyping this out. And so like that's a whole kind of project of its own, which can be a challenge.
Thanks, Suzanne. Scott, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you have either a smooth D9 upgrade or a particularly challenging one that you'd like to share?
Sure, yeah. I just posted in the chat a link to some docs on Drupal.org. I don't think I've had a super difficult one, but the one that was more challenging, I made use of this sort of documentation to create an issue fork on Drupal.org to make the module in question Drupal 9 compatible, and then update the Composer file so that it is actually able to bring in that dependency through Composer. It's, a little bit of a workaround, hopefully temporary, but it just felt better than any of the alternatives, like just downloading the module directly into your code base, for example. So I just thought I would share that. Yeah, I think in general, I would say, like, I definitely echo a lot of what the other panelists have said. It's not necessarily the D8 to D9 part that's tricky. It's like the other things in play. It's Composer. It's, if you have to upgrade your PHP version. And I think part of why my upgrades have tended to be smoother is because things have tended to be kept fairly up to date, like things like PHP versions, even just individual modules. I've been fairly lucky that the sites that I have upgraded have been reasonably up to date, so there hasn't been a big delta that I need to cross there. So I would say, I think that's a bit of a lesson for, the next upgrade of like D9 to D10 is like, keep your sites up to date, because there's a lot of benefits. It's not like, oh no, there's a security update and now I need to update my stuff. Like, that's obviously one benefit, but I think getting smoother upgrades is a nice one too.
Absolutely, yeah. If you needed any more reasons to keep your site up to date, that's definitely one to consider. So this question, I know we discussed a little bit about this. Some of the harder use cases were related to platform-specific issues, but in case there's other panelists that have a story to share around that, the question is, hey, are there any really platform-specific issues you ran into? Maybe not that were difficult, but even that just surprised you.
Yeah, I think so we're running most of our websites on Pantheon, and so one of the things that we didn't expect, and there's documentation on this, but I think Squiggy was mentioning this, the challenges as well, is we've got almost like two things we're doing at once, which our takeaway was like, try not to do two things at once, was sort of our lessons from that. Is that the integrated composer in Drupal 9 Pantheon has a lot of really cool tools like built into it, but looking into it and sort of seeing what the process might be for sort of like future, we've got some other sites that we're in the works on as well for going through this process. And there's a D9 like starter project where if you just go into Pantheon and like spin up a D9 site, it's going to be integrated composer on Drupal 9, and basically all the integrations and the DevOps stuff just comes out of the box if you do that process. And and then the thing is, we've got a D8 site that needs like Solar updates and a bunch of other things that need to happen at the same time. So we're hoping to learn our lesson from the last one, and basically you spin up a D9 site on Pantheon and then Composer downgrade it to Drupal 8. So that now it's got the DevOps stuff like in there on Drupal 8 with integrated composer, and just get that to work. And then we'll get that to work first, and then we'll move over. So it's a D8 to a D8 upgrade, but just in basically two different accounts. And then we can get into Solar, and that'll be one thing. And then Drupal 9, which will be a different thing, and sort of go through that process there. So that was our assumption, was that when we started was like, hey, we should take the D8 site, look at what the specific upstream configurations are, and like copy and paste them into the configurations on the legacy site. And that's probably harder to do than it is to just copy the Drupal 8 resources from one place to another. But this, so that's, we're just starting off that. So we can report back later on how it goes, but I think that strategy, we're sort of in the chats and sort of communicating with folks about that. And that seems to be the way to go. So it's just easier because moving a Drupal 8 to a Drupal 8 sort of structure is pretty darn easy once composer's managing everything. And so that's something I think would be, a good strategy for moving forward on that kind of project.
So maybe the counterintuitive part is starting with the Drupal 9 and downgrading to Drupal 8.
That was counterintuitive to us.
Yeah.
We kind of like,
go the other way.
Okay, let's start.
That seems like a really helpful tip for the scenario I'm in. It's actually the exact same scenario where the site does have like Pantheon Solar.
Yeah.
And it's Drupal 8. So I did exactly what you described, like updating the configuration from the Drupal 8 site, the original one. And so that, I guess I may have to try what you just suggested, start with Drupal 9 and downgrade, and then add in the Drupal 8 specific, configuration and modules.
Yeah, because there's the Solar 4 to Solar 8 like upgrade part. So maybe we should.
I don't even know. I haven't even started with the solar part.
Yeah. Well, we can collect. There's a channel on the Pantheon support channel for Composer. So
Okay.
maybe we can share notes over there. We've got some basically some conversations. We're just ready to start over there.
Okay.
So maybe we can
I'll definitely try that
compare
channel.
notes. Would be helpful.
One question here, like Aidan and Blake, does anyone use Pantheon local dev here? Like I installed it in my Mac, and it comes with Composer 2, and I had a lot of conflict with the PHP versions. Like I linked to PHP versions, updated the PHP versions, and then unlink and then link back to the PHP versions of my Drupal 8 site. It's still having some problems. Like, does any known issues with Pantheon local dev with PHP version conflict? Like, as per the documentation, it says after just installation, it should work. Like, it's not working.
You've totally anticipated our next question, which is, are there
Very good segue.
Are there any local? What does everyone's local dev look like? And did D9 local dev environments look like? And did D9 force any changes upon us? So so Muk said, I don't have any answers. I'm not using Pantheon local dev, so I have no experience with that.
So in terms of like what should I try Lando also, like for using a Mac, or stick to local dev? Like local dev, actually, as per I didn't find anything in the internet, because it says maybe it's my problem in any configuration or anything here, but I'm still actually struggling with PHP versions. Like it's continuously showing another one after another, like fix one and then showing another PHP versions. And I checked Composer version, it is showing Composer 2. Like if I install the latest local dev, it's Composer 2 here. Maybe some issues with that, but I'm still working on it. I just started working yesterday.
Yeah. So I'm curious to hear what the other panelists say. Our team is we're using MAMP locally installed and brew install for all the libraries we need. And we were very seriously, we tried out Lando years ago and really liked it. Like, it's an awesome setup, but the performance hit we got from running Docker in a Mac was so painful for theming that we eventually abandoned it. And now we're having that, is it the time again, maybe M1 Macs make this possible for it to be efficient or something? But is it the time again to look at a Docker or something, a Docker-based tool of some kind? So I'd love to.
Yeah, we use Doxel. Found that's been really good for our team. But when we do trainings, we get people to set up Lando, because it tends to be a lot easier to install, just in terms of I guess, setup, ease of setup and success rate for people with machines that are just have really different configurations.
Mhm.
But yeah, it did, I mean, there were definitely issues with like how slow it took if you just use the default configuration for some of these things a few years ago. I think in my experience, those like once the tools got a certain level of adoption, there's good solutions for all that stuff.
It's Shona. I know I'm not one of the panelists, but I have tweaked my Mac to get Docker to run quite a bit faster in the last couple of weeks. I don't remember what I did. I just remember there were a few settings that I could tweak because we are using Lando or DDEV for almost all of our projects. But I'm the only one who's consistently running a Mac, I think. So, but we did, there's definitely been some improvements in running Docker on Macs, but you have to manually tweak individual like sliders to make it work. I can go look up what I did. I did
that
write
would
it
be
down somewhere.
super wonderful, and maybe pop it in the Slack chat.
Yeah. I wrote it down somewhere.
I would love to, or a screenshot of your config setting if it's less effort. But
Yeah, I had to give it an enormous fraction of all of the brain power of my computer, I know. So
awesome.
Yeah, Shona mentioned DDEV. I was just going to say that I've been getting a lot of mileage out of DDEV recently. Yeah, I haven't used all of the Docker-based tools, but I think to me it's kind of hits a sweet spot for what I'm looking for, at least. It's easy to set up, but then you can also still tweak it and make little custom commands and stuff. I would say this wasn't really driven by D9, but it works really well with D9. So yeah.
So I've been mostly using Lando lately, the past couple years, and Docker-based tools. I'm not on a Mac, so I actually used to use a Mac before 2016, but the Docker was so slow on it, I switched to Linux.
Just to follow up then with everyone, when you're working on Docker-based systems, is anyone using like Node or Gulp to like compile themes like inside of the environment, or are folks if they use tools like that, are we say compiling SAS or whatever, or are people running the compiling outside of the virtual machine and then like syncing the file, like you can do the file syncing between your local work folder and particular folders inside of a virtual machine?
In my case, when I'm using Lando, so the files, local compiled theme files are synced, and I run Node locally on my machine. So I don't usually, I've never run it inside of the container Node inside.
I would also say it might be worth looking at, I don't know what the current state of it is, but I know a few years ago there was like a C version, like native C version of SAS that might be faster in a container, like,
Mhm.
across the whole Mac OS boundary thing. Like if what's running in the container is faster, then that should hopefully translate to faster compile times and stuff. So it might be worth exploring where that's at nowadays.
Sorry, can I just jump in and ask, is it just the SAS compiler that's really slow?
Yeah,
there-
because it really like parses hundreds of files and like, loads them into memory and then compiles other items out. So it was really the file syncing. So we ended up compiling in our local machines outside of the container, and then it tends to regenerate a whole bunch of files really quickly. And then the time it takes for those files to transfer across to the virtual machine was like really slow. So our compiles go from like being able to look at something, you press save and it's like half a second to recompile a bunch of files, to like a 4-second wait or something, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're actually actively theming, like that's a pretty every time you press save, it really adds up and sort of, you kind of forget what you're doing, waiting for things to speed up.
Right, lots of good dialogue on the local dev. I think moving on, wanted to open up the floor to any of the attendees if there's anything particular that you wanted to know about Drupal 9 upgrades, give our panelists an opportunity to answer. And it's a small group here as well, so feel free to participate in kind of open discussion. So if you have a question, feel free to come off mute. You can ask it. If you'd prefer, put it in the chat. Happy to kind of read those out on your behalf.
I wouldn't mind asking a question, but it's about migrating from 7 to D9. And some advice on setting up the composer files, starting from 7 and going up, especially if a couple of the sites that I have composer was never used. So you got to basically start from scratch. So if anyone has some advice on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, Suzanne, I know you're pretty familiar with the change from 7 to 9. Perhaps you could lead that off, or not to put you on the spot. Anyone else that has a good answer to Jason's question?
Sure. Yeah, I think you can literally start from scratch. I mean, if you're not starting with a distribution or anything, there's just like if you're starting a new Drupal 9 project, you would be using the installing Drupal with Composer to begin with. And then you'll have a Composer file that's pretty bare bones. And then as you add things with Composer, they'll just be added to that file automatically. So there's not like really any step that you need to do other than just creating your project to begin with Composer, as far as I know.
But how do you get, and then how does 7 migrate in easily?
Yeah, so typically when we do Drupal 7 to 9, our approach for, I think, every project we've done has been to start with Drupal 9, build the site, create the configuration, and then migrate content from Drupal 7, rather than doing like a whole enchilada, like try to migrate all the configuration as well. If you're taking that approach, I'm not sure if there would be some way to, I actually am not as familiar with the steps just because we haven't taken that approach. Most of our projects were doing a lot of improvements and cleanup as part of the work. So I'm not sure if somebody else knows if you're moving from 7 to 9, how Composer plays a role there.
I suspect I'm also not aware of any tools that will automatically translate, like let's say a set of D7 modules into a D9 Composer file. I kind of suspect, I agree with like Suzanne, like I've taken the approach of like just build the site and then add stuff in as you need it. Because I suspect if there was such a tool, you would spend just as much time kind of tweaking the outputs as you would to just manually build your new Composer file. Like start with the Composer template, like Suzanne mentioned, and then, Composer require any modules that you want to add on top of that, contrib modules and themes and that kind of thing.
Okay, great, thanks.
There's actually, we haven't used it either. We also go with the custom crafted site because usually it's like, you're telling a client like, great, you do all this work and the site's going to be exactly the same as what you started with, except you spend all this money and get nothing new. So that's like a harder pitch than saying, hey, let's like do that and make the website way better. But I think there's migrate upgrade module, which is designed to like, again, I haven't tried it, but I think it's designed to get all that config automatically to Drupal 8. So it might be worth looking in to see if that that road might be useful for getting all the configuration sort of stuff out of your Drupal 7 site and onto, I guess, 8, and then you would upgrade from 8 to 9, which may be worth looking into.
Awesome. Does anyone else have, questions for the panel? Topics they'd like to discuss? We can move beyond the topic of just Drupal 9 if, just general Drupal questions, if folks are here for that.
What's in the works for automatic updates in Drupal 10, like WordPress? Any word on that, or if it would ever happen?
Yes, it's all coming together. And it's the exciting thing, and the reason why it's taken so long is that it does work with like how you're managing your code. So the idea is that you're not just making these updates superficially, like it's actually going to go through a proper composer-based workflow.
Oh.
But actually, when it's going to come into core, I'm sure. Does anyone know the date?
I believe it's the roadmap or the idea at least is to get it done by the time Drupal 10 is released. But
perhaps it'll be an experimental before then. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that part.
That would be fun.
I have seen that, but I think that might be still in rumor category. I think, or hope, aspirational.
This is where rumors come from, guys.
I just watched the
perpetuating rumors. Pardon me?
I just watched the European Dries note that happened a month or so ago, and I think he says right now it should work without Composer, but not with Composer. I think that's what was said.
The automated updates?
Yeah. Maybe still experimental, but I think it works without Composer.
Is anyone else terrified of automated updates? I'm so afraid of them. Just
you have to let go, Aiden. You have to learn to let go.
Gotta let go. Just whatever. Yeah. Apparently, we heard it's Dree's birthday today.
I'll say something. We just launched D9 on our two big products. It took a while to get there. I posted something in the thread. We sort of did it over the last month. Like we took like one part, which was updating our code base, released that to local stage and prod. Then we updated Composer. Then we got the new Composer file. And so it took about a month to get there, but honestly, it was super painless from 8 to 9. Like it just took some time to make sure we dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's.
So the QA work, like, basically is a decent chunk of that.
Yeah, we were afraid it would be like we were afraid there'd be a lot more stuff going wrong. So we sort of buffered in time to have more manual QAs. But we found virtually nothing to worry about, except one thing. On one of our sites, we had a funny module that we don't like the latest point version of for business reasons. So we had to use an old one, which was not upgraded to Drupal 9. So we had to do this thing where we upgraded the module to Drupal 9 and then did a patch release to downgrade its functionality back to like a couple of point releases. That was weird, but that was it.
Shona?
I have a question about how to pitch this, because we've got clients that have older machines or older systems that are still on 7 and they're just digging in their heels and we're like, we're never giving this up. We're never upgrading. And I'm like, you gotta. So how do I do that? You gotta component. What's my selling point here?
Yeah, so if you're on Drupal 7, like there's so many things that are improved about Drupal 9. I mean, if you're on Drupal 8, the difference to Drupal 9, right, is still minimal. But if you're on Drupal 7, there's a lot of things that are really not optimized. Like you're not getting the best user experience for content editors. You don't have as good like multilingual management. And maybe you're not feeling those pain points because you've already adapted and added in all the contrib modules you need to fill the gaps. But it's more like the future possibilities. Like as soon as you do want some new feature, like Drupal 9 is just going to have so many better features. But it really depends on like what types of things are going to convince those particular users. Like maybe they would love the idea of media library and core. And
yeah, I think we have a number of fairly non-technical users that struggled through to be able to use it in the first place, and now they're like, we've trained our people, this is what we're doing for the rest of our life.
Yeah, but then like Aiden was saying, it's hard to pitch anybody on like, oh, you're just going to update the technology and get the exact same result. Like it's much easier if you're able to say, oh, well, at the same time, because we're going to take advantage of this process, we're also going to improve the UX, or we're going to.
So you'll get better UX.
Or we're going to give you more flexible tools. Like a lot of Drupal 7 sites don't have a good page building tool, and people have to like go and edit blocks in 5 places to make it change the landing page. So those
we'll
types of things
empower them to do more of that themselves instead of having to come back to us for all those changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of that is stuff that you're getting because it's a newer version of Drupal, and some of it is stuff that it's just like, well, it's been however many, like maybe it's been 7 years since the website's been updated, so the way that you architect it is just going to be that much better.
Okay. That's useful. I'll need to, maybe someone can give us a UX overview on that. how these, because I've only worked on the old D7 sites, and this I'm here as I need to learn about doing the upgrades because I'm still keeping the old D7 sites from falling over. So
yeah, absolutely.
An angle that we see, like, so a specific example of that, more flexibility. We see our newer sites have fewer content types that can be more within a content type, and is sort of something we're kind of noticing. So they used to be like, years ago, we'd have like, say if it was like a content site for a business or whatever, you'd have like people pages and then like product pages, and you'd fill out a sea of fields that would then get placed into those particular content types layouts. Now we're moving more to like layout builder, where it's like, you don't, we've got like a component that is appropriate for a people page and a component that's appropriate for a product page, and you might use layout builder to create those. And when those exceptions come over, like, oh, can we please put an alert box at the top of our product page that isn't a code push, right? Like alert box is one of our components, and you can fully stack it at the top of that page. So there's a lot of freedom that folks have that appreciate moving from like 7 to 9, where it's like not just a sea of fields you fill out, and like we're going towards something where you can kind of see what it's going to look like and start building those things out.
Cool.
I can see.
Okay.
Yeah, anecdotally, I'll just add, we've had a lot of our contributors say like, oh my gosh, D8 and now D9 is so much better than the D7 experience, which is really nice to hear. I second the fact that there's less workarounds. Like our contributors are like, oh, we had to do this, and then we had to do this, and had to do this. And with D8 and 9, we sort of simplified those processes. And as for getting people to buy into it more, I've been reading some stuff that Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, and maybe you could find the same results for D7 to D9, or like 10% improvement in contributor performance or something like that. Like, I don't know, that's what I used. Seemed to get some eyebrows raised.
Yeah, Drupal 9 is definitely a lot faster. One of the sites I upgraded, it was like, the pages loaded way faster, just without doing any other optimizations, just upgrading.
So maybe
so I need to show them the front end's better, the back end's better. It's just better all over.
be a good point to end on. It's just better all over. So want to be mindful of the time here. I know folks are really busy. Just wanted to take a quick minute to thank everybody for joining the meetup. I'm glad we were able to have a good discussion and dialogue. Hopefully this was helpful. If you could take a quick minute, please complete our survey at bit.ly DTO.9. One of the main questions we're really looking to get feedback on is, hey, how are folks feeling comfortable about resuming in-person meetups perhaps in the new year? So if you could take a minute, let us know, that would be greatly appreciated. And with that, if there's nothing else, Aiden or anyone else, I wish you all a great rest of your day and weekend.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. It'll probably be New Year before we connect again. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.